Money is a cage. It traps both the body and the mind. Understanding the mechanics of this cage helps us distinguish between reason and illusion. Yet, even when we understand, we never escape the endless trade-offs. That passage opens the spirit of a rare book, one that dares to look straight at the most uncomfortable truths about money. Popodowski's The Uncomfortable Truth About Money is not like those promise-filled guides to getting rich. Unlike fervent, optimistic speeches, this work exposes deep paradoxes. Even when you possess a lot of money, insecurity doesn't disappear. It merely changes form. It shows that money is both a means to freedom and a burden that makes us stoop. The book moves from private memories, a boy watching his mother waste away from illness, growing up in scarcity in Brooklyn, to experiences in the volatile world of investing, where billions of dollars can vanish in a single trading session. Each story illustrates money's fragility. What seems solid today can dissipate tomorrow. It's not a key to a stable paradise, but a slippery surface where everyone must learn to keep their balance. What makes the book special is how it forces readers to confront the truth. Stability is an illusion. We want to believe that a steady job, stable savings, a stable investment portfolio will protect us. But then financial crises, global pandemics, inflation, or political turmoil all show that every certainty is just a mask. The only thing we can control is our ability to think independently and remain calm amidst chaos. So, how can we truly live with money? Is it possible to transform anxiety into a form of understanding so that instead of panicking, we observe and learn to adapt? And is there a way to escape the comparison trap, where those with little money feel ashamed and those with much live in fear of losing it? These are questions the book doesn't answer with formulas, but with a journey from debt to prices, from office politics to global market shocks. Each section is like a mirror, reflecting the limitations and illusions we all carry. Listening to this book, you won't find promises of quick riches. Instead, you'll find the honest truth that money is an uncertain game, where intelligence is sometimes not enough. Luck sometimes comes too late, and mistakes are inevitable. But within that uncertainty, we can still build mental frameworks, points of support to keep us from collapsing in the face of volatility. So, what's more valuable? A desire for eternal stability, or a mind daring enough to embrace chaos to find the meaning of freedom? Money is a cage. It traps us, forcing us to scramble to live within it. This realization doesn't come from a theory in books but from fragments of memories intertwined with life and death. As a child, I watched my mother slowly decay like a rotten pear, soft from the inside. Cancer gnawed at her bit by bit. Amidst that chaos, I taught myself to create order, how to boil eggs, how to climb, how to take care of myself. When I had my own child, I understood one more thing. Creating order also meant knowing how to live with money. Before that, I despised those who cared too much about money, deeming them narrow-minded, lacking in imagination. But one afternoon in 1997, standing on a Brooklyn sidewalk, holding my 3-year-old son's hand, with fat rats scurrying among the trash in front of us, I knew I was wrong. I didn't want to raise my child in a place where rats lived as brazenly as landlords. To escape that situation, I needed money, and I didn't have it. That was the starting point of a long journey. I realized money isn't everything, but it's inescapable. It's cash today and money for a distant tomorrow when we're old, if we're lucky enough to live that long. Money is dollars, but it can also be euros or Japanese yen, changing with each country. It's used to buy food, medicine in emergencies, and things we don't truly need but want to have. It's a dry number, but also a feeling of anxiety, desire. Everyone is trapped in the cage of money. It binds both body and mind. Understanding how this cage operates helps us distinguish between reason and emotion, and from there, learn to stay calm and make fewer mistakes. But money never gives us fixed answers. It only brings endless trade-offs. Talking about money makes most people uncomfortable. People are willing to boast about where they studied, even send nude photos to strangers online, but no one wants to answer how much money they have. Everyone feels insecure. Those with little money feel inadequate, those with much fear envy or being asked for handouts. Even the rich feel poor when compared to the richer. I was once a small-time reporter covering the cotton market, earning $38,000 a year in New York. While I struggled, the traders in the cotton pit understood a language I was completely clueless about. They would briefly say, "Prices up due to hurricane." It took me time to grasp their meaning. Decades later, I became a partner at one of the world's largest hedge funds, trading everything from cotton and copper to oil, stocks, bonds, and real estate. I had more money. But the worry about money was still there. Externally, others saw me as a boring middle-aged man who went to work, ate dinner, occasionally attended parent-teacher meetings. But internally, I always knew money was just a tool. What's more important are the vibrations of life's fleeting moments. Holding my mother's hand before she passed, smelling the salt in the Massachusetts marshes, reading a perfect poem in a quiet cafe. These moments had nothing to do with money, yet money was the silent chain that bound me, forcing me to pay for apartments, bills, medical expenses. The rich and famous often lose their way because they lose that chain, thinking they've escaped reality, but they haven't. Money is like death. No one escapes it, and like sex, it's always awkward to talk about. My father awkwardly lectured me about sex, but never about money. I'm the same with my children. Perhaps it's because I myself never truly understood. This book is the conversation about money I never had with my children. I learned to face it directly. Money is as unstable as health or life itself. One day healthy, the next day sick, employed today, unemployed tomorrow. A calm market can collapse in an instant. Germany was once a powerful nation, then suddenly fell into the hands of a madman, creating hell. This can happen anywhere. The massive stone columns of banks or the dignified suits of experts are just masks concealing the truth. The monetary system is inherently unstable and fragile. Anyone who wants to survive must learn to observe, study, and find patterns. It's like walking in an avalanche zone. You must understand why snow collapses, learning about mechanics, history, psychology, low probability but devastating disasters. I once met a central bank governor who could meticulously explain inflation, but was confused when talking about long-term interest rates or stocks. Even those who run the system only understand a part. Partial understanding leads to big mistakes. To fill these gaps, we need mental frameworks. One basic example is inflation. Money loses value over time. To understand inflation, you must understand how prices are formed, how supply and demand factors change. Otherwise, you'll be swept away, like the Germans during the Weimar Republic or Americans in the 1970s or those after the COVID-19 pandemic. The truth is, money doesn't care about us. It has no feelings, grants no security. We must adapt to it, not the other way around. And the first step is to separate what we can control our minds from what we cannot, the chaos of the world. Money never brings stability. That's a common illusion, a persistent desire in the human mind. We want money to be a shield against storms, but the truth is, it never guarantees it. The world is always shifting, jobs change, crises follow one after another, and even our bodies are not durable. The only thing we can control is our mind. The uncertainty of money is deeply intertwined with childhood scars. I lost my mother too early, and that loss instilled in me a constant sense of insecurity. In contrast, my father, a meticulous scientist who participated in the Manhattan Project, lived with a firm scientific spirit. He didn't know much about finance, but passed on the lesson of thoroughness and not being wasteful. Lucky to have my father, unlucky to lose my mother. These two contrasting experiences shaped how I viewed chaos and order. My spouse grew up in the Soviet Union with an alcoholic, violent father and a perpetually deprived society. She carries a blunt practicality. The more money, the better, but don't waste it on meaningless things. When we became parents, it was natural to try to instill in our children the spirit of learning, hard work, and saving. But it wasn't easy. Children carry their own wounds from the past, the programming errors that life has sown. We adopted a girl who was abandoned as an infant, and that left an indelible mark on how she perceives safety. My son also has a different learning style, similar to the dyslexia that once haunted me. Everyone's starting point is random and unique. Some are born into scarcity, others are cushioned by abundance. All of this shapes how we view money. If born at the bottom of society, we only know absence. At the top, we are accustomed to plenty. But this perceived normalcy is an illusion, essentially just luck. How can we escape these fractures? By training the mind, getting enough sleep, eating moderately, exercising, meditating, therapy, even religion. All help us see that the chaos in our heads is just fleeting thoughts, not reality. But achieving that calm requires time and discipline. Some people seem pre-programmed to be calm amidst chaos. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, or Ray Dalio, the founder of the fund where I once worked, might belong to that group. I remember my father with an Asperger's-like coolness, never diagnosed, less affected by emotions but sharp in analysis. That kind of mind is well suited for money. In contrast, most of us are emotional roller coasters. I am too. Constant anxiety makes my head spin. The only way is to learn to observe, to recognize when I'm falling into panic, to separate the logical from the emotional. Only when calm can we clearly see the external chaos, financial crises, technological shifts, because the economic world operates on the principle of creative destruction. Joseph Schumpeter described this nearly a century ago. Old things are swept away for new ones to be born. Horse-drawn carriages were replaced by cars. Gasoline cars are gradually giving way to electric vehicles. Uber's arrival shook traditional taxis. Companies rise and disappear. If we're on the winning side, we see it as natural order. If we're on the losing side, we feel injustice, but we cannot resist. Societies that tried to resist, like the Soviet Union or North Korea, fell into decay and oppression. Creative destruction never stops. I witnessed it from when I was a child, delivering the morning Washington Post, a newspaper once powerful enough to force an American president to resign. Yet, just a few decades later, the internet dried up advertising revenue, and that print empire fell freely, eventually bought by Jeff Bezos. Within this destruction are fierce crises. I've lived through the Asian financial crisis of 1998, the dot-com bubble of 2000, the credit crisis of 2008, and the global pandemic. When people rewrite history, these events are just a few lines of text, but in the living moment, they were nightmares. Hard-earned savings suddenly evaporated, tens of thousands of dollars lost in a few days. This instability is the personal pain of each individual. Ray Dalio, whom I worked with, was always haunted by his grandfather's memories of the Great Depression. He believed such crises would recur due to the nature of debt. Debt is spending today but bearing the burden of repayment tomorrow. When debt swells and bursts, then tightens, the economy plunges. The system's structure is inherently unstable. George Soros explains it with the concept of reflexivity. Asset prices rise, people become euphoric, spend more, creating a self-reinforcing loop. Crowd psychology and prices constantly interact, making the system perpetually unstable. Looking back, there's a very useful concept, volatility. It's the rate of change. Short-term bonds have low volatility. Stocks can drop 30% in a year. But volatility isn't just in the market, it's in our lives, job loss, illness, personal crises. Volatility is unavoidable. And that's why the first step in the journey with money is learning to stay calm. We can't stop the storm, but we can train ourselves to observe and respond. Anxiety doesn't disappear, but recognizing, I am anxious, is a big difference. Only from that calmness can we continue to build strategies for income, savings, and the future. The next step in the story is income. Income is the heartbeat of financial life. It's not just a number on a paycheck, but a profound bargain, trading a part of freedom for survival. Work is that exchange. We sell our time, energy, and skills for money. But within that, there are also adventures, memories, unexpected experiences. I've had countless jobs: bicycle courier, cleaner, carpenter, mountain guide, teacher, bartender, then reporter, eventually stepping into banking and investment funds. Each job opened a distinct slice of life. Sometimes the pay was so low my wife and I had to sleep on the kitchen floor to give our only room to our son. Other times, I sat in brightly lit halls where figures like Bill Clinton or Mikhail Gorbachev spoke. Income doesn't just buy survival, it also buys irreplaceable memories. To understand income, there are 4 questions to answer. How much is needed? What can be done? What scale? And how does it chain? First, how much is needed? That number shouldn't be estimated but specific. I've kept a spending spreadsheet for decades, like body weight. No one likes stepping on the scale, but if you don't know where you stand. Every month, I record every expense and then look at the average to cut out excesses. When income is 0, I need to know how long I can last. Savings create that breathing room. Our actual needs are always less than we imagine. My maternal grandfather was a living example. A former fighter pilot who lived through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and the inflation of the 1970s. He lived a radically minimalist lifestyle, eating whole grains, drinking tea, exercising by walking and push-ups, borrowing books from the library. No house, no warm winter clothes in cold weather, he'd drive to Mexico. He taught me the difference between the essential and the superficial. Wealth begins with realizing we need less than we think. Next, what can be done? School often only teaches us what we're bad at, rarely highlighting what we excel at. But in the global job market, only by knowing our unique abilities can we compete. A degree is an important passport. My father had a PhD in biology and spent his life researching at the National Institutes of Health. He was paid to pursue his passion for discovering muscle fibers. But my maternal grandfather had no degree. His whole life, he struggled with manual labor, never finding his unique specialty. I stood between those two paths. When studying medicine, I quickly realized it wasn't for me. Lack of focus and dyslexia were barriers. I switched to history, struggling with long essays, but at least I could breathe. Later, I combined history, journalism, language, culture, economics, and markets into my own profession, explaining the world to help others invest. How we earn money depends on connecting seemingly disparate pieces into a valuable picture. Then scale. Some jobs require few people, so they pay well, like a neurosurgeon. Some jobs create products that can be scaled globally, like a software engineer. Both offer exceptional income, but most other professions don't have that scale. A classical musician spends a lifetime training, but the number of seats in an orchestra doesn't increase. In contrast, a film composer can reach millions of listeners. Scale separates mere subsistence from wealth. I once witnessed a distant relative, Rob, choose a different path. While everyone around me worked for the government in Washington, he borrowed money to open a stock account, turning $100,000 into $1,001 night in New York. He took my brother and me out amid soaring skyscrapers to a noisy pub. I realized no one is forced to remain poor forever. We can choose a different path. Finally, change. All income sits on a melting iceberg. The once mighty Washington Post now belongs to Jeff Bezos. The bank where I worked was bought and sold many times. Even a large hedge fund, once inflated, eventually shrunk. Income can increase, but only if we jump to another iceberg before it sinks. The secret isn't in keeping one source, but in the ability to adapt in time. We live in an era where technology, from electric cars to AI, changes jobs daily. Seemingly stable professions, librarian, cashier, even junior lawyer, can disappear. Even asset values are overturned as the climate changes. Floods submerge once safe lands. Income is the first door on the journey with money, but it's not static. It's a flow, and we must learn to navigate it. Only when we understand what we need, what we can do, how to scale, and prepare for change, do we truly gain control in the exchange between freedom and money. To understand better, we must continue to where everything converges. Price, the invisible measure of all transactions. The salary we receive is the market value assigned to our skills. The bills we pay are the value of what we consume. And the assets we own, from stocks to apartments, are today's price of tomorrow's cash flow throughout our lives. We bargain with these numbers, and to understand money, we must understand them. Price is both a precise measurement at a given moment and a prediction of the future. A stock is bought and sold today because people believe it will be profitable tomorrow. How much a doctor is paid, how much a plumber charges, it's all the meeting of supply and demand, between basic needs and distant expectations. The superficial appearance of human-assigned prices conceals their natural essence, like water always flowing by gravity. Demand is an inextinguishable instinct. Whether under dictatorship or democracy, people must eat, drink, have shelter, and receive medical care. When the COVID-19 pandemic erupted, a thermometer could jump to $1,000. The government could cap prices, but a black market would emerge. Supply and demand ultimately win. Technology further makes prices change fiercely. I remember my first time in Moscow in 1990, wanting to tell my father I had arrived safely. I had to queue at the post office, write a few words on a piece of paper, arrived, fine, and pay by character. Today, a message from the airport flies instantly, for free, for the same need. But the price is now almost zero. Similarly, photographs once needed film and development. Now, it's just a tap on a phone. Prices change as technology redefines limits. Facing this flow, we must decide where we want to stand. Near the center, where money surges but pressure is immense, or at the periphery, where it's calm but the flow is weak. A neurosurgeon can earn millions but lives under constant pressure. A gardener earns far less but has a tranquil pace of life. A job that is both high-paying and leisurely doesn't exist. In consumption, the difference lies in what we choose to buy. My maternal grandfather taught me to eat little, choose simply, cut out excess. Someone with a high income but who lives frugally can accumulate wealth. Conversely, someone with a moderate income who chases average spending will remain stuck. Wealth isn't just about earning a lot, but also about paying less than the majority. In investing, the problem is more complex. The price of an asset reflects both the present and predictions about the future. Buying something of quality that is undervalued is ideal but rare, and the future is inherently uncertain. Nevertheless, trying to understand the forces pushing and pulling prices is essential. The wise principle: receive prices at the high end of the distribution and pay prices at the low end. The brain surgeon goes to a discount supermarket. The software engineer walks instead of buying a lavish golf club membership. Conversely, someone exhausted by a barely sufficient job burns more money on luxuries. That's a formula for destitution. But the story of prices doesn't stop at the individual. It's a social issue. No one has ever found a way to price labor that everyone finds fair. The common laborer looks up at the high-income class and sees injustice. Those at the top believe they deserve it because of their education, effort, and acceptance of pressure. Human history is full of imbalances. Russia before 1917, Germany before 1933, China before 1949. Both flaws in wealth distribution and prosperity concentrated in a few hands can easily make society explode. Politics, therefore, cannot be separated from prices. The state decides tax rates, businesses decide salaries, unions bargain with management. Taxes, to me, are an obvious truth to be paid and factored into planning. In the US, holding stocks for over a year helps reduce taxes, while short-term trading eats away nearly half the profit. Even interest from bonds and dividends from stocks are taxed differently. To understand money, one must understand the rules of taxation. Prices also reveal something else: who suffers so others can breathe easily. When I was poor, friends criticized me for selling my soul when I switched from journalism to banking. But facing rats crawling in my apartment, I had no reason to maintain a romantic spirit. I chose stability for my family. And then, as my income grew, I gradually drifted from the austere frugality I had maintained before. What was once a luxury suddenly became a necessity. The cage of money, therefore, closed another loop. I still remember an evening at a gas station after pumping air into the tires of my old Honda. A wrecked car sat in the corner of the garage, stained with blood. The driver had died in an accident. I looked at my two small children in my car, and that very day went online to find the safest car. The answer: an Audi, twice my budget. But how could I turn away? Price is not just a number. It's a measure of safety, sometimes even life itself. From the overpriced thermometers during the pandemic to the car we choose for our family, price is the conduit of every decision. And by understanding it, we begin to understand money. But that's only one part. Beyond prices, there are social classes, the invisible lines money draws. Money doesn't just price every item or every hour of labor. It also draws invisible walls, dividing people into social classes. At each level, people look across the wall with both yearning and insecurity. The poor look up at the rich and see injustice. The rich look down at those below and feel fear of being robbed, despised, or pulled down. I grew up in scarcity, seeing friends with new clothes and spacious homes, and immediately understood that invisible boundary. When I grew up and stepped into brightly lit rooms, meeting national leaders, I understood another aspect. Abundance doesn't necessarily bring peace of mind. It merely changes the form of worry. At the bottom, people worry about next month's bills. At the top, they worry about their assets evaporating, their children not measuring up to others, being left behind in an endless race. Money constructs soft class systems, like modern castes. They aren't written into law, but everyone feels them. The path to a prestigious private school opens up unique opportunities, while children from poor neighborhoods attend underfunded public schools. A person in a suit in a high-rise office is distinct from someone in uniform working shifts in a factory. Every small detail: where one lives, how one dresses, the type of car one drives becomes a class identifier. But the irony is that no matter the level, money still binds us. The poor may feel guilty for not being able to provide for their families. the rich may feel guilty for having more than they think they deserve. This psychology gnaws at them no less than hunger. Leaving the broad scope of society to enter the workplace, money reveals another face: office politics. If out there we witness social hierarchy, in the office we see intricate power games. The workplace isn't just where tasks are completed, it's a subtle arena where every glance, every word, every handshake can be a strategic move. Competent people don't necessarily get promoted. Those who understand the psychological currents, who know who is powerful, who is weak, who needs an ally, often advance further. Money here flows along hidden political currents rather than any measure of fairness. I've witnessed unforgettable scenes. A brilliant, creative colleague whose fiery temper and awkward social skills ultimately led to him being sidelined, while someone less talented but skilled at flattery and networking climbed to management. People say politics is dirty as if it's an exception. In reality, it's the natural operating principle of every group where money and power intertwine. From the outside, these offices look like professional, cooperative spaces. But once inside, I realized each desk is a chessboard, and the year-end bonus is like spoils of war. People invent rumors, block each other's projects, or form factions to win resources. Some are even willing to sacrifice the common good just to maintain their power. For those who believe in justice, this truth is bitter, but denying it only leads to failure. Surviving in the corporate environment requires understanding its politics, just as it requires understanding prices out there. It's an unavoidable current that can only be observed and reacted to. The wise learn to balance, doing enough to protect themselves from being eliminated, forming alliances to avoid isolation, but also maintaining independence so as not to lose their true selves. In meetings, the right silence can be more valuable than words. A nod or a frown from the right person can shift an entire project's funding. Money and power in the workplace are inseparable. Whoever controls the money has the say. Whoever distributes the budget shapes the fate of colleagues. Therefore, understanding the workplace is also understanding a microcosm of society, with its ups and downs, its hierarchies, its psychological games, its rewards and punishments. When we leave the building after work, we think we've escaped, but no. The cage of money extends from society to the office to the very bedrooms of each family, where marital arguments are often about nothing other than bills, children's tuition, or this year's bonus. From broad social stratification to the narrow battles within an office, money is always present as the controlling string. And on this journey, we will realize that mistakes are unavoidable. Office calculations, personal decisions, investments all will be wrong at times. The difference isn't whether we make mistakes, but how we confront them. Mistakes are the common currency everyone must pay when living with money. No one is exempt. Rich, poor, highly educated, unlettered, all have experienced losses, made wrong choices, made failed trade-offs. The issue isn't avoiding them, but transforming mistakes into a store of lessons, a framework for not repeating them. I recall my early days, naively believing that hard work and study would ensure stability. But I quickly realized that every financial decision could be a trap. Buying when the market was euphoric only to see prices plummet the next day, trusting advice only to lose accumulated savings. Initial mistakes left me numb, like a punch to the chest, but afterward I realized they were also the harshest curriculum. Mistakes aren't just in investing, they appear in career choices, spending habits, and family relationships. The cost of a wrong decision is often measured not just in money, but also in time, energy, and trust. I once changed jobs thinking I'd earn more, but lost valuable learning opportunities. I once spent to alleviate anxiety, only to feel doubly hollow as my account dwindled. The most uncomfortable thing about mistakes is that they repeat. Humans have a natural tendency to avoid pain, but often fall into the same old traps. A hot market makes us forget risk. Temporary stability makes us forget volatility. Our nature makes us seek safety in the most dangerous places. I once witnessed a talented colleague become overly confident after a few good years. He ignored warning signs, aggressively leveraged speculative positions. One unexpected swing, everything evaporated. He left the company in silence, his career all but ended. Mistakes spare no one, especially those who think they are immune, but therein lies an opportunity. Mistakes are the raw material for building wisdom. If we are brave enough to look directly, each time we lose money, it teaches us something. Control emotions, diversify our portfolio, don't put everything into one assumption. Each time we choose the wrong career or relationship, we learn to listen to ourselves more clearly, to have fewer illusions about others. There's a concept in investing I always keep with me. Drawdown, the percentage drop from peak to trough. It's like falling in life. No one wants to fall, but no one avoids it. What matters is how you get up and how carefully you walk next time. Mistakes, in this way, are an essential part of growing up. Looking back, I see everything I've discussed from the beginning of this journey leads here. The money cage forces us to scramble. Volatility makes us anxious. Income is the trade for freedom. Price is the invisible measure. Social classes and office politics make us stumble. And finally, mistakes are the unavoidable consequence, but they are also a door opening to wisdom. One of the most valuable things I learned from mistakes is that there's no eternal formula for money. All we have is a mental framework, a way of seeing things to reduce the chance of being swept away. Mistakes remind us to be humble, that money is always uncertain, and that arrogance is the shortest path to bankruptcy. In my memory, I still recall standing in a cramped apartment, holding an electricity and water bill, not knowing how to pay it. I felt like a failure. But from that very feeling, I learned never to overlook even the smallest number. Just as when I saw more successful friends, I learned not to compare based on superficial value. Mistakes transform humiliation into motivation to look deeper into the nature of money. And so, as I conclude this thread of content, I see clearly that we all live in the cage of money amidst volatility, changing incomes, uncertain prices, interwoven classes, overlapping politics, and unavoidable mistakes. But precisely because of mistakes, we learn to stand firmer, to be wiser. The journey doesn't end here. What follows is even more intense. Debt, resources, assets, portfolios, schools of thought, stopping points in labor, narrow life and death straits, and slogans that obscure the truth. But before moving on to that chapter, what needs to be remembered is that mistakes are not an end, but a guiding light to move forward. Stepping away from the impacts of income and prices, the next question arises inescapably. Debt. It's not a strange concept. It's in every bank letter, every card swipe, every housing contract. Debt can be a bridge to freedom, but it can also be a noose tightening around your neck. I remember the evening my son asked, "Dad, why do we keep paying rent every month and get nothing to keep?" That question echoed like a hammer blow in my mind. Why pay rent instead of paying ourselves? That moment opened a long conversation about the nature of debt. First, let's look at credit card debt. It's as sweet as candy placed right before your eyes. One swipe, and you have the item of your dreams. But behind that sugary shell are horrific interest rates, potentially up to 18–20% per year. If not paid off in full each cycle, the debt will swell exponentially. A $50 shirt can become $200 after a few years if you only pay the minimum. Credit card debt is a trap. It should only be used as a short-term convenience and paid off every month. Otherwise, it turns into a prison. Conversely, mortgage debt is a different story. It's the only type of debt that can turn into a long-term asset as you gradually pay it off. That house is no longer the bank's but yours. But to understand this, you must view a mortgage as a bond you sign with the bank. If you choose a fixed interest rate, you are buying certainty. You know exactly how much you'll pay each month for 15 or 30 years. If you choose a variable rate, you're betting that the market will be on your side, that borrowing costs will be lower. Sometimes that gamble succeeds, but sometimes it plunges an entire family into crisis when interest rates soar. A mortgage is essentially a cash flow parallel to your life. Each month you pay a portion of the principal and interest, while the value of the house can rise or fall with the market. It's both a dwelling and a silent gamble. Those who witness the real estate bubble burst understand that a roof over your head isn't always a sure asset. It can be a haven, or it can be a burden if bought at the wrong time, at the wrong price. Debt also creeps into other corners. Student loans, car loans, business loans, each carries its own logic. Student debt can be seen as an investment in oneself, provided the field of study truly opens opportunities. Car loans are often dangerous because cars depreciate quickly. You've already lost money the moment you drive off the lot. Business debt can be profitable, but can also become a rope dragging you to the bottom. The difficulty with debt lies in its ambiguity. With the same tool, a skillful person turns it into leverage, and clumsy person turns it into shackles. Remember the era before kings borrowed to build palaces, when empires expanded through war loans. Debt has always been associated with power, but also sowed the seeds of collapse. Today, at the individual level, the situation is not much different. I once witnessed a friend drown in credit card debt. Initially, it was just restaurant meals, a few small trips, but gradually the amount swelled to an uncontrollable level. He started hiding it from his family, juggling by opening new cards to pay off old ones. Eventually, the whole system collapsed. Those debts didn't just erode his finances, but also tore apart family trust. Debt, when out of control, doesn't just kill accounts, it kills relationships. Conversely, another person I knew used debt as a ladder. She borrowed to buy a small apartment, rented it out to pay off the debt, then used the leverage from the first apartment to buy a second. Over many years, she built a solid real estate portfolio. For her, debt was not a burden but a tool to build freedom. The key here is that debt is only meaningful when tied to an asset or a cash-generating opportunity. Debt for consumption, to satisfy short-term desires, only enslaves you. Debt for investing in education, housing, or business, if carefully calculated, can open other doors. So how do you tell the difference? A simple rule: if the debt doesn't create or preserve value in the future, don't touch it. Don't let emotions guide you, because debt is inherently designed to entice. Credit card ads promise reward points. Banks readily offer easy loans. But behind that glamour is a cold truth: you're selling your future to buy your present. When you sit down to sign a loan agreement, ask yourself if your future self in 5 or 10 years will thank you today. If the answer is vague, that's a clear signal to stop. Debt is a double-edged sword. With the same steel blade, you can cut off shackles to walk free, or you can accidentally gash the very hand holding it. And when you understand that duality, you become clear-headed enough to move forward, to look at the broader currents. The source of money in the entire system, something that operates beyond the will of any individual. If debt is a door that opens or closes individual freedom, the next question is, where does that money come from when you borrow? Who created that money when interest rates change? What makes society tremble? To understand money, one must understand the invisible flows that operate the system. In many people's imaginations, money is green paper printed by the government, filling treasuries. But the truth is far more complex. Modern money is primarily created by central banks, not just by printing paper, but through a sophisticated system of pumping and draining. When the economy weakens, the central bank loosens policy, lowers interest rates, encourages borrowing, and floods the system with money. Consumers spend more, businesses invest more, asset prices rise. Conversely, when inflation soars, the central bank tightens, raises interest rates, drains money from circulation, making borrowing harder, spending slower, and unemployment increases. Each adjustment is like the heartbeat of society. Too fast, chaos; too slow, stagnation. But central banks are not the only source. The second source of money is credit. Every time a commercial bank lends to someone, new money is created. You buy a house with a mortgage, and instantly that money appears in the seller's account. No additional paper money was printed, but the money supply increased. When the loan is repaid, the money supply shrinks. Credit is an echo of printing money, expanding and contracting the economic rhythm. To visualize, I use an analogy from The Wizard of Oz. Behind the big curtain is a small wizard pulling levers, creating smoke and mirrors, a booming voice that makes the crowd tremble. Central banks are similar. They are not omnipotent but control tools that sway the entire financial world. A single interest rate decision can wipe out trillions of dollars in an instant. We saw this clearly during crises. In 2008, when the credit market collapsed, the U.S. Federal Reserve cut interest rates to near zero, injecting emergency funds to save the system. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they repeated it on a far larger scale. The consequences: stock prices, real estate, even cryptocurrencies soared, but at the same time, inflation smoldered and then erupted violently. Once money is pumped too strongly, it can become a flood that submerges everything. The tricky question is, do central banks truly know what they're doing? I've sat in closed meeting rooms, listening to them analyze models and indicators. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. They were also just guessing with overly complex data. The market isn't a machine, it's a living organism with emotions, panic, expectations. A strong touch can cause convulsions throughout the system. At the individual level, what does this mean? It means the money in your pocket depends on decisions you don't control. One beautiful day, interest rates rise, your house price falls, your mortgage becomes heavier. Another day, interest rates drop, stock prices rise, and you suddenly have extra money. Fundamentally, it's not just a personal matter, it's ripples from a macroeconomic ocean. This is an uncomfortable paradox. We work, save, and invest, but the results are swayed by strangers at the central bank. They aren't malicious, but they aren't omniscient either. This system operates on collective trust. Everyone believes that the dollar, the euro, the yen will retain value tomorrow. If that trust falters, everything collapses. History is full of evidence. Germany after World War I printed too much money to pay debts, leading to hyperinflation, where people pushed wheelbarrows of cash to buy a loaf of bread. Zimbabwe in the 2000s, Venezuela in the past decade. All are lessons about printing money beyond limits. Conversely, tightening money too strongly is also devastating. The Great Depression of the 1930s partly stemmed from the central bank's failure to inject money in time, causing thousands of small banks to fail and millions to lose jobs. This invisible flow always oscillates between two extremes, flood and drought. What can we do? Not predict precisely, but recognize that the system is always unstable. When we understand that pumping and draining are natural cycles, we will no longer naively believe in eternal stability. And then, we prepare ourselves by diversifying, keeping some for safety, some for growth, and closely observing the signs of the flow. Debt helps us climb the ladder, but the overall systemic money flow determines where that ladder is placed, on solid ground or suspended over a deep pit. Understanding the pump and drain mechanism is the next step after learning to handle the debt knife. Because from here, all the assets we own will be affected, and we must know where to place them so as not to be swept away. After understanding debt and seeing the invisible flow of money throughout the system, the next question is, where should we store value? Cash is just a thin shell, easily eroded by inflation. What truly endures over years are assets, and for centuries, humans have revolved around four basic boxes: cash, stocks, bonds, and real estate. Each box carries its own story, a different rhythm of risk and reward. The problem isn't choosing one box, but understanding each one thoroughly and then combining them into a balanced picture. Cash is the most recognizable box. It's the balance in our bank account, the bills we carry in our wallets. It gives us flexibility, the peace of mind that we can pay immediately. But behind that safety is a silent enemy: inflation. A dollar today buys more than a dollar a year from now. Holding too much cash is like sitting on sand. It seems solid, but you're actually sinking, grain by grain. Conversely, stocks are the box full of promising growth. When you buy stocks, you own a piece of a business, a ticket to the playground of those building the future. If the company succeeds, that value multiplies. But stocks are also an untamed horse. A small economic fluctuation, a rumor, a crisis can make their value evaporate in a few days. Stocks carry both the exhilaration of the future and the terror of collapse. Bonds are different. They're like a contract between you and a government or a corporation. You lend them money, and they promise to pay periodic interest and return the principal when due. Bonds are generally considered more stable than stocks, especially government bonds. But even they aren't absolute. High inflation can erode returns, and a company's credit risk can turn a promise into worthless paper. There are special types of bonds, like inflation-protected bonds, designed to preserve value during periods of currency depreciation. Bonds are a slower breath, less dramatic, but also less tragic than stocks. Finally, real estate. This isn't just an asset but also a place to live, a place to build a family. Real estate gives us a sense of concrete ownership: an apartment, a plot of land, a house. But it's also linked to specific risks: geographical location, policies, climate change, even human migration trends. A house in a developing city can skyrocket in value. A house in a forgotten region can become a burden that no one wants to buy. Real estate is both a roof and a long-term gamble. The important point isn't in each individual box. The important point is diversification. Keeping everything in cash leaves you vulnerable to inflation. Putting everything into stocks makes you tremble at volatility. Putting everything into bonds, you sleep well, but you age with depreciating money. And if you only believe in real estate, you might find yourself rich on paper but suffocating from cash flow. In a world where central banks pump and drain and credit expands and contracts, each box reacts differently. When interest rates are low, stocks and real estate soar, but bonds become less attractive. When interest rates rise, stocks plummet, real estate stagnates, and cash regains its position. No box is invincible. There's only wise coordination. I've witnessed many people put all their faith in one box. A relative bought only real estate in one region, and when the local economy weakened, the entire portfolio collapsed. Another colleague held only tech stocks, made huge profits in the early 2000s, then lost everything when the bubble burst. Conversely, those who knew how to diversify, keeping some cash for safety, some bonds for stability, some stocks for growth, some real estate for the long term, weathered the storm. This principle sounds simple but is foundational. Think of the four boxes as the four legs of a table. Remove one leg, and the table might stand in calm times, but in a breeze, it collapses immediately. With all four legs, it can withstand more shaking. The lesson is, don't let greed or fear make you cling to just one box. When you understand the nature of each box, you can begin the real game, assembling them into a complete meal. That investment portfolio will be the next step in the journey. Once we've opened each box and clearly seen the characteristics of cash, stocks, bonds, and real estate, the natural question arises: how do we combine them? A delicious meal doesn't just come from good ingredients, but also from how they are combined. Similarly, a portfolio is not a simple addition of four boxes, but a blend to create a meal that can nourish you through the years. The first thing to remember is that the goal is not to get rich quickly, but to survive and grow steadily. Like a marathon runner, no one wins by sprinting for a few hundred meters, but by maintaining a steady pace throughout the race. In finance, this means finding ways to sustain stable compound interest. Returns reinvested year after year gradually multiply. But compound interest never flows smoothly like a calm river. It's like a mountain stream, sometimes babbling, sometimes roaring, sometimes dry. Therefore, we need other metrics to control standard deviation, or the degree of fluctuation around the average. An ideal portfolio not only delivers good returns, but also limits overly severe shocks. The margin of risk is as important as the expected return. I've met many young investors who excitedly put all their money into tech stocks for a few years. They boasted about tripling or quadrupling their money, but then a 40% drop wiped out all their gains. What they didn't realize is that to recover from a large loss, you need double the return. A 50% loss requires a 100% gain just to get back to the starting point. Avoiding extreme losses is more important than seeking enormous profits. That's why you must practice with small amounts before risking large ones. The market isn't just about numbers, it's also about psychology. Holding a stock that drops 20% in a virtual account is nothing. But when it's your real savings, you'll feel your heart rate spike, sleepless nights. Only through real experience do you know your tolerance threshold. The principle of risk diversification is key. Don't concentrate everything on a single, delicious dish at one time. Instead, allocate so that each box carries a portion of the burden. When stocks soar, real estate might be slow. When stocks fall, bonds can maintain pace. When all three are volatile, cash gives us breathing room. Like an orchestra, no instrument needs to be too loud, but the overall harmony is what matters. In investing, there's a memorable keyword: draw down the decline from peak to trough. It's a chart of real pain. A good portfolio is not one that never falls, but one that falls less and recovers faster, delivering lower but stable returns rather than skyrocketing then free falling. I remember an experienced colleague once saying, "The goal isn't to eat the whole world, but to survive long enough to get your share." That became my guiding principle because a portfolio isn't a momentary race, it's a multi-decade game. Persistence triumphs over fleeting brilliance. To illustrate, imagine a meal. Rice is cash, simple, filling, but you can't eat it forever. Green vegetables are bonds, light, balancing. Meat and fish are stocks, nutritious but can be overwhelming if you eat too much. Spices are real estate, not always needed, but without them the meal is bland. Combining them creates a complete feast. The hardest part is the proportion. Too much rice, you're full but not nourished. Too much meat, you have excess energy and can get sick. The same applies to a portfolio. Incorrect allocation is self-inflicted risk. There's no single formula because everyone has different tastes and circumstances. But a wise formula always revolves around spreading evenly, reducing dependence on a single variable. A portfolio, then, isn't a complex calculation, but a philosophy of life that accepts an uncertain future. The only certainty is that volatility will occur. Knowing this, we no longer bet everything on one hand, but arrange each part to protect the others. And once the meal is laid out, the next question is, which school of thought suits me? Because beyond the portfolio, the investment world is full of small religions, index, value, growth, macro, each sect with its own dogma and rituals. That will be the journey of the next section. Once we've grasped how to combine the 4 boxes into a balanced meal, the next question is, which school of thought will we follow in the financial world? Investors don't just debate stocks or bonds, they form small religions with their own doctrines. There are 4 major schools often encountered: index, value, growth, and macro. Those in the index school believe no one can consistently beat the market long-term, so it's best to buy the entire market through index funds. They are like believers practicing a simple ritual, consistently putting money into an S&P 500 ETF and patiently waiting. The strengths of this school are low costs, fewer emotional mistakes, and a firm adherence to the philosophy that the overall market always goes up in the long run. But hidden behind this simplicity is a paradox. An index is not neutral. It reflects the selection of stocks within its basket. For example, the S&P 500 is heavily skewed towards technology, so index investing is essentially a bet on a particular industry group. The value school believes the market often misprices things. Their mission is to find companies that are undervalued relative to their true worth, buying when others are indifferent, then waiting for the market to recognize their true value. Warren Buffett is the iconic figure of this school. The core philosophy, buying $1 for 50 cents. But to do this requires extraordinary patience, as sometimes you have to wait years for a stock to rise. In contrast, the growth school hunts for companies with the potential for explosive future expansion. They are willing to pay a high price today for tomorrow's potential. From Amazon to Tesla, miraculous stories often begin with this philosophy. But the risk is that if growth doesn't happen as expected, the stock's value collapses rapidly. The greater the expectation, the deeper the disappointment. Finally, there's the macro school. These are people who believe the secret lies in reading the world's major trends: politics, interest rates, global capital flows. They bet on changes in currencies, oil prices, government bonds. George Soros is famous for this philosophy, particularly with his bet that broke the Bank of England in 1992. But macro investing is a tough gamble, as predicting the macroeconomic future is one of the riskiest games. Additionally, there are smaller groups like systematic investors and discretionary investors. Some prefer illiquid assets like private equity and venture capital. All are like small branches of faith, each confident that their path is the correct one. But the truth is, no doctrine is absolute. Each school is just a lens viewing a part of the big picture. The wise learn from multiple schools and find a blend that suits their personality and circumstances. After choosing a path, the next question is, when to stop? People cannot work forever. At some point, we must live off accumulated assets, and the formula for that moment turns out to be very simple. Accumulated money divided by the number of years left to live must be greater than annual expenses. For example, if you expect to live another 30 years and spend $50,000 annually, you need at least $1.5 million to stop working. It sounds dry, but this formula has saved me from illusions many times. Instead of a vague, how much is enough? I have a clear number to hold on to. Another tool is an annuity. This is a product where you pay a sum to an insurance company, and in return, they pay you a regular income stream for the rest of your life. The advantage, you don't worry about outliving your money. The disadvantage, you entrust your faith to an insurance company, and if they go bankrupt, that promise becomes meaningless. Annuities also make you lose flexibility because the money is locked away. The paradox is that too little money traps you, but too much money isn't necessarily a blessing either. the overly rich can easily become isolated from the community, losing their sense of belonging. A wealthy boss might find himself lonely in his mansion, unable to share his worries with anyone. Conversely, someone with just enough, who knows when to stop, can live more happily. The retirement point is therefore not just an arithmetic formula, it's a point of mental balance. Stopping doesn't mean ceasing to live, but transitioning to a different way of life, where work is no longer an obligation but a choice. Once we've chosen a school of thought and calculated our stopping point, the picture seems complete, but there remains a deadly narrow pass. Unexpected snipers can ruin all plans from accumulation to retirement. To understand this clearly, we must delve deeper. Even when you've accumulated enough, balanced the 4 asset boxes into a portfolio, chosen an investment philosophy, and calculated your retirement point, a lurking danger remains: the snipers. These are unexpected events that can shatter your entire plan, causing you to collapse in an instant. Among all the snipers, health is the most dangerous. An accident, a cancer diagnosis, a stroke call can turn a person from rich to broke, from free to enslaved. No portfolio is strong enough to counter colossal medical expenses or years of lost earning capacity. I've seen brilliant colleagues build fortunes over a lifetime only to dissipate them in a few years due to illness. Houses sold, stocks liquidated, leaving only a hospital bed. So, how do we face this sniper? The answer isn't in financial charts but in seemingly simple habits: wearing a seatbelt while driving, not smoking, limiting alcohol, getting regular checkups, maintaining a healthy weight, exercising, getting enough sleep. These aren't general pieces of advice, they are real fences protecting your portfolio. Health is the original asset. If lost, everything else crumbles. Beyond health, there are other snipers: divorce, war, natural disasters, political crises. Each bullet can strike unexpectedly. They cannot be completely eliminated, but their probability or impact can be reduced through insurance, psychological preparedness, and a social network so you're not alone in adversity. I remember the image of a street in Sarajevo during the war, where snipers hid on rooftops. People had to run quickly across open stretches, praying they wouldn't be hit. Financial life is similar. We traverse various paths, always at risk of being unexpectedly struck down, and no one can guarantee they'll run fast enough or be lucky enough. After traversing this entire journey from the cage of money through volatility, income, prices, class, office politics, mistakes, debt, money supply, assets, portfolios, investment schools, retirement points, and snipers, I've distilled it into slogans. They are not magic formulas, but shards of a mirror reflecting light into the chaos. 1. Money is a cage. Learn to live within it. 2. Stability is an illusion. Preparing for volatility is the reality. 3. Income is trading freedom for money. Understand your needs and capabilities. 4. Price is an invisible heartbeat. Observe it to avoid being deceived. 5. Class and office politics are both driven by money. Don't be naive. 6. Mistakes are harsh teachers. Learn from them to avoid repetition. 7. Debt is a double-edged sword. Use it only to build, never to consume. 8. Central banks pump and drain. Recognize the flow larger than yourself. 9. The 4 boxes: cash, stocks, bonds, real estate. Allocate wisely. 10. A portfolio is like a meal. Don't let one dish dominate. 11. Investment schools are just small religions. Learn from many, don't be blind. 12. The retirement point is not just a formula. It's a state of mental balance. 13. Health is the original asset. Protect it before thinking about profit. 14. Beware of money gurus. There are none, not even me. These slogans don't eliminate insecurity, but they help us navigate it without getting lost. Money will forever be a question without a final answer. But when we dare to look directly, we learn to live with it with humility, clarity, and a bit of courage. We have journeyed together through a long path, where money appears not just as a tool of exchange, but as a living, complex, and contradictory structure. It both confines and liberates, brings hope and sows insecurity. The most obvious truth, after all, is that money can never provide absolute certainty. It only opens up choices, and it is we who must confront the consequences of each of those choices.